A forgotten mail-order bride saved a dying cowboy. Unaware he owned everything, Clara had never imagined that leaving her small hometown in a distant country would lead her to a vast, lonely ranch in the middle of nowhere. She had been waiting for months, her hopes flickering like a candle in the wind for a letter or a signal that she was wanted, that someone would come to meet her. But instead, she arrived at a quiet station under a scorching sun, with no one to greet her except a hired driver who barely spoke a word. She clutched her small trunk tightly, her heart pounding in a mix of fear and excitement. The dusty road stretched endlessly ahead, and the wind carried the scent of dry grass and horses. The driver finally stopped at the entrance of the ranch. A wide gate creaked open, revealing a sprawling landscape. Fences lined the property, and the ranch house stood solitary, proud yet weathered by time. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Everything was bigger than she had imagined. The fields seemed to stretch forever, dotted with cattle that moved lazily under the afternoon sun. Birds circled overhead, and the distant mountains stood like silent guards. She stepped down from the carriage, unsure where to begin. She expected a warm welcome, perhaps a smile or a kind word, but there was none. The house itself seemed quiet, too quiet, as if it were holding its breath. Clara walked up the creaking wooden steps to the porch and knocked gently on the door. It swung open with a soft groan, revealing a man sitting in a worn armchair near the fireplace. He looked older than she had expected, his face weathered and tanned by years of sun and wind. His hair was dark but streaked with gray, and his eyes, though sharp, held a tiredness that made Clara's heart ache. "Are you Clara?" he asked in a low, hoarse voice. She nodded, her throat dry. "Yes, sir, I came to be your wife." He did not smile, he did not rise. Instead, he coughed, a deep, rattling cough that seemed to shake him to his core. Clara instinctively took a step forward, alarmed. "Are you sick?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He waved her concern away, though his hands trembled slightly. "I'll be fine, sit down if you like." Clara hesitated, then moved toward a chair across from him. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, filled only by the faint crackling of the fire. She tried to think of something to say, anything that could break the tension. I'm not sure what to do first," she admitted, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her scarf. Do you need help with anything?" He shook his head. "You don't have to do anything, just be here." For a moment, Clara felt a pang of disappointment. She had imagined a life filled with laughter, shared meals, and the gentle guidance of a kind husband. Instead, she found herself in the presence of a man who seemed more ghost than person, wrapped in silence and shadow. But Clara had never been one to give up. She decided then and there that she would stay. The first few days were a trial. Clara moved carefully through the house, cleaning and tidying, washing dishes, and cooking simple meals. Jack, she learned his name quickly, rarely spoke more than a few words at a time. He remained in his chair for hours, staring into the fire or out the window at the endless fields. Clara watched him quietly, noting the way he winced when he moved, the deep lines etched on his face, the way his eyes, though sharp, seemed clouded with pain. One afternoon, Clara found herself in the kitchen chopping vegetables when she heard a soft groan from the living room. She hurried over and found Jack doubled over in his chair, clutching his chest. Fear surged through her. "Jack." "What's wrong?" she cried, rushing to support him. He tried to wave her off, coughing violently. "I'm fine, just give me a moment." Clara ignored his protests. She helped him lie down on the couch, gently laying a blanket over him. His breathing was shallow and uneven. She could feel his pulse racing beneath her fingers. The sight of him so vulnerable, so human, stirred something deep inside her. She realized that this man, whom she had met only days ago, had already begun to occupy her heart. Over the next few days, Clara devoted herself to his care. She prepared warm meals, brought water, and made sure he rested. She discovered small things about him. He loved black coffee, he preferred his socks folded neatly, and he had a stubborn streak that refused to admit weakness. Yet, despite his gruff exterior, Clara sensed a sadness in him, a loneliness that mirrored her own. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Clara found Jack sitting quietly on the porch, staring at the horizon. She joined him, sitting close enough to offer comfort but not so close as to intrude. "You've been very kind," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "Most people wouldn't stay, they'd leave." Clara smiled gently. "I'm not most people." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time, Clara saw a flicker of something behind his tired eyes, trust, perhaps, or relief. He coughed again, and she handed him a glass of water, watching as he drank slowly. That night a storm rolled in, fierce and sudden. Rain pelted the roof and wind rattled the windows. Clara lay in bed, listening to the storm, but sleep eluded her. She felt a tug of unease, a sense that something was not right. Her instincts proved correct. A loud crash startled her from her bed. Jack's cough had turned violent, echoing through the empty house. She sprang up and ran to him. He was on the floor, clutching his chest, gasping for breath. Clara's heart raced. She had never felt such terror, such helplessness. She called out his name, shaking him gently, willing him to respond. His eyes fluttered open, wide with fear and pain. "Clara, help me," he whispered. Everything inside her surged with urgency. She knelt beside him, supporting his weight, whispering calming words, trying to steady him. The storm raged on outside, but inside it felt like the world had shrunk to just the two of them, battling against fate. Hours passed like minutes. Clara held him, rubbed his back, and spoke softly, her voice barely audible over the storm. Slowly, his breathing eased and color returned to his cheeks. He looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and astonishment. "You saved me," he murmured. Clara shook her head, tears brimming. "No, Jack, we saved each other." The storm eventually subsided, leaving the ranch quiet once more. Clara stayed awake that night, sitting beside him, feeling a connection growing between them. A bond forged not by wealth, beauty, or circumstance, but by care, courage, and the simple act of showing up for someone when they were at their weakest. By morning, the first rays of sunlight spilled across the fields. Jack was sitting up in bed, exhausted but alive. He met Clara's eyes, and for the first time there was a softness there, a hint of warmth that had not been present before. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice stronger now. "For staying." Clara smiled, a quiet satisfaction filling her. She knew this was only the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, more storms, more sickness, perhaps misunderstandings, but she was ready. She had come here alone, uncertain, and yet she had already become an anchor in someone's life. And in doing so, she had found purpose, courage, and a sense of belonging she had never known before. As she looked out over the ranch, the fields bathed in morning light, Clara realized that her life had changed in ways she could not yet fully understand. She had arrived as a forgotten mail-order bride, unsure of her place. But in saving a dying man, she had begun a journey that neither of them would forget. And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew that this ranch, these fields, and this quiet, stubborn cowboy would shape the story of her life forever. Clara had grown used to the rhythms of the ranch, yet every day brought a new discovery about the man she cared for. Jack's stubbornness fascinated her. Even after surviving a life-threatening illness, he refused to let anyone see him as weak. He insisted on walking through the fields alone, feeding the cattle and checking fences, even when his steps faltered. Clara tried to help, but he waved her away with a quiet stubbornness that left her both frustrated and admiring him at the same time. She began to notice small details about him that revealed his hidden strength. He had a careful way of handling the animals, speaking to each horse and cow with a soft, steady voice. His hands, though rough and scarred from years of labor, moved with precision and care. Clara realized that behind the gruff, solitary exterior, Jack had built something remarkable, a ranch that was alive with life, running smoothly despite the absence of many helpers. One quiet afternoon, while Jack rested in his chair after a long morning of checking fences, Clara wandered into the study. The room smelled faintly of leather and old books, and the sunlight from the large windows highlighted the dust motes floating lazily in the air. She had been meaning to tidy up, but her curiosity led her further. Drawers lined the walls, filled with neatly stacked papers, old ledgers, and envelopes addressed to no one in particular. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over a folder labeled ranch documents. Her heart pounded as she opened it. Inside were deeds, contracts, and bank statements, evidence of ownership she had never imagined. Clara's eyes widened as she realized the truth. This was no ordinary ranch. Jack owned hundreds of acres, properties in distant towns, and investments that spanned more than just this small area. He had built an empire quietly, without fanfare, without drawing attention to himself. She sat back in shock, trying to process what she had discovered. All this time, she had thought Jack was just a lonely, ill cowboy struggling to survive. But he was so much more. Clara felt a mixture of awe, confusion, and fear. What would happen if Jack found out she had seen his secrets? Would he trust her, or would he see her as someone seeking his wealth? She carefully returned the papers to their folder, making sure everything looked exactly as she had found it. Later that evening, she found Jack sitting on the porch, gazing at the sunset. The sky was ablaze with orange and pink, and the wind carried the scent of hay and earth. She joined him silently, not wanting to disturb his thoughts. He glanced at her, his tired eyes softening just slightly. "You've been quiet today," he said, his voice low. Clara hesitated. She wanted to tell him how she had seen his documents, how amazed she was at everything he had built. But the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she simply nodded. "I was thinking," he continued, "about how life can change in a moment. One day you think you understand your path, and the next, everything shifts. People leave, illness comes, the land changes." Clara felt her chest tighten. She had learned in the days she had been here that Jack had suffered great loss, family gone, friends distant, and a life filled with quiet battles. She realized that his wealth was only one part of the story. Behind it lay pain, loneliness, and fear of trusting anyone again. The next few days brought subtle changes. Jack began to speak more, sometimes sharing stories from his past. He told Clara about his father, who had taught him the ways of the ranch, about the winters that tested every ounce of his strength, and the betrayals that had made him cautious and withdrawn. Clara listened, her heart filling with empathy. She understood that his pride and stubbornness were shields, built to protect himself from further hurt. One morning, as Clara prepared breakfast, she noticed Jack moving slowly through the kitchen, his face pale and lined with exhaustion. She rushed to help him, guiding him to a chair and handing him a warm cup of coffee. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she said gently. "I'm fine," he replied, though the way he held the cup suggested otherwise. Clara didn't argue. Instead, she stayed by his side, making sure he had what he needed. She realized that caring for Jack required patience, courage, and constant attention. Yet despite the challenge, she felt a quiet pride. She was becoming indispensable, not through force or obligation, but through genuine care. One afternoon, Clara found herself in the barn, tending to a horse that had injured its leg. Jack came in, leaning heavily on his walking stick. He watched her work in silence, his sharp eyes noting her gentle handling of the animal. "You have a way with them," he said finally. Clara smiled, wiping sweat from her brow. "I learned from my father. He always said, treat them kindly and they will trust you." Jack nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. It was the first real smile she had seen from him in days, and it warmed her heart. She realized that trust was slowly building between them, small moments forming a bond that neither could deny. That evening, as Clara settled Jack into his chair by the fire, she noticed him staring at the floor, lost in thought. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "Life," he said simply, "and how easily it can be taken from you. I've been alone for so long, I forgot what it meant to have someone care." Clara's breath caught. She wanted to tell him that she cared, that she had chosen to stay not out of duty but because of him. But she waited, letting him speak first. Days turned into weeks, and Clara's role in Jack's life became more than just a caregiver. She was a companion, a listener, and gradually, a source of comfort. She found herself learning the rhythm of the ranch, the times the cattle needed checking, the patterns of the weather, the quiet moments when Jack's vulnerability showed through. She understood that caring for him was not just about medicine or meals, but about presence, patience, and understanding. One evening, a letter arrived from a distant relative of Jack's. Clara recognized the name immediately. It was someone who had once been close to him, but had disappeared from his life under mysterious circumstances. The letter hinted at interest in the ranch and property, asking when Jack might be able to meet them. Clara felt a flicker of concern. She knew Jack had no desire to open old wounds or invite complications, but the letter made her realize that his past and his wealth could bring challenges she had not yet imagined. That night she found Jack sitting on the porch again, staring at the stars. "Jack," she began cautiously, "someone sent a letter today. They want to meet you." He turned to her, his eyes sharp, though his body was frail. "I don't want to see them," he said firmly. "They only ever cause trouble." Clara nodded. She understood. She also understood that Jack had built walls not just for himself, but to protect everything he had worked for. She realized that her presence here was more than just care. It was protection, loyalty, and sometimes courage. The following morning, Clara noticed Jack moving more slowly than usual. His breathing was shallow, and he winced as he walked. She helped him sit down, guiding him gently. He looked at her, a shadow of frustration in his eyes. "I hate feeling like this," he admitted. "I hate needing help." Clara shook her head. "Everyone needs help sometimes, even the strongest people." "It doesn't make you weak, it makes you human." He sighed, leaning back in his chair. For a moment he said nothing. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "I don't want to lose what I've built or the people I care about." Clara's heart ached at his words. She realized that Jack's world was fragile, not because of his wealth, but because of the walls he had built around his heart. And she understood that her role was not just to care for him physically, but to help him heal emotionally, to show him that trust and love could exist again. Weeks passed, and Clara's presence became a lifeline for Jack. She cooked his meals, tended the animals, managed the ranch office, and most importantly, listened. She learned about the lonely nights he had endured, the fears he had carried, and the regrets that haunted him. In return, Jack began to open up, telling her stories of the land, the cattle, and the quiet victories of running a ranch successfully. One afternoon, as Clara filed documents in the study, she came across a folder marked bank accounts. Her curiosity overcame her hesitation. She opened it slowly, careful not to disturb anything. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Jack's wealth was immense. He owned more than just the ranch, investments, properties, and assets she could barely comprehend. She realized the magnitude of what she had stumbled upon. Clara closed the folder gently, her mind racing. She had never expected this. Jack, the quiet, ill cowboy she had come to care for, was not just a man surviving. He was a man who had built a life and fortune that most could only dream of. Yet here he was, sick and isolated, unaware of how extraordinary he truly was. That evening she brought him a cup of tea and sat beside him, unsure how to share what she had discovered. Jack looked at her, his tired eyes meeting hers, and for the first time she felt the weight of their connection. "You've been thinking a lot," he said softly. Clara smiled, trying to steady her voice. "I'm just amazed. You've done so much here, and yet you've carried it all alone." Jack's gaze dropped. He did not respond, but Clara sensed a shift, a quiet acknowledgement that he knew, deep down, that his life was extraordinary in more ways than one. As night fell over the ranch, Clara realized that her journey had only just begun. She had saved a man's life once, but now she faced a deeper challenge, helping him face the world again and perhaps helping him trust someone completely. She understood that love, care, and courage were now intertwined with the fate of the ranch, the man, and the life they could build together. And somewhere in the quiet of that vast, starry night, Clara knew that secrets, wealth, and pride were only part of the story. The true journey was just beginning, the journey of trust, connection, and the possibility of a shared future. Life on the ranch had settled into a careful rhythm, but Clara soon realized that keeping Jack safe and well was far more challenging than she had imagined. Each day, she watched him struggle to manage tasks that once came easily. Even walking to the barn or checking the fences left him winded and exhausted. Clara could see the frustration in his eyes every time he had to rest, every time he had to rely on her for help. Yet he refused to ask for more assistance than necessary, refusing to let anyone see him as weak. One morning, as the sun rose over the fields, Clara found Jack struggling to lift a bale of hay. She rushed to his side, placing her hands under the heavy load. "Jack, let me help," she said gently, her voice firm but kind. He shook his head stubbornly. "I can do it, I have to." Clara knew she couldn't force him, so she stayed beside him, offering guidance and encouragement. Together they managed the task, moving slowly but steadily. Clara noticed how every small victory, every moment of perseverance, made Jack's eyes shine with a hint of pride. She realized that helping him wasn't just about physical labor. It was about helping him regain confidence, helping him feel capable even as his body weakened. But Clara soon realized that the challenges extended beyond Jack's health. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail that sent a shiver down her spine. It was from a distant relative of Jack's, someone who had vanished from his life years ago. The letter hinted at interest in the ranch and the properties he owned, asking when he would be available to meet. Clara knew instantly that this could bring trouble. She could see the tension in Jack's posture as he read the words, the tightness in his jaw. "I don't want to see them," he muttered, tossing the letter onto the table. "They only ever brought trouble." Clara nodded, understanding that Jack had his reasons for avoiding them, yet she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. These people knew about his wealth and could bring chaos if he allowed them back into his life. She made a silent promise to protect him and his legacy, whatever it took. Days turned into weeks, and Clara's responsibilities grew heavier. She was not only caring for Jack, who remained weak and easily fatigued, but she also began managing the ranch in his absence. She learned how to organize the workers, schedule tasks, and even make financial decisions when necessary. Each day was a test of endurance, patience, and courage. Yet despite the challenges, Clara felt a deep sense of purpose. She was no longer just a mail-order bride. She was becoming the anchor of Jack's life, the person he could rely on when the world seemed too harsh. Jack, for his part, began to open up more, though his pride remained intact. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the distant hills, he spoke quietly. "Clara, you've done more than I could have imagined. You've stayed when most people would have left." Clara smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I promised myself I wouldn't leave. You needed someone, and I wanted to be that person." Jack's gaze softened, and for a moment the barriers he had built around his heart seemed to crumble. He coughed softly, leaning back in his chair, and Clara instinctively moved closer, offering him the warmth of her presence. She realized then that her care was no longer just about tending to his body. It was about tending to his spirit, helping him rediscover trust, companionship, and hope. But peace on the ranch was fragile. One afternoon, as Clara worked in the barn, she noticed two men riding toward the property. Their posture was confident, their eyes sharp, and Clara's heart sank as she realized they were not ordinary visitors. She hurried to the house to warn Jack, her mind racing. "They're here for the ranch," she said breathlessly. "I think they know about your property." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Let them come," he said, though his voice carried a hint of tension. "I won't let them take what I've built." Clara could see that despite his weakened state, Jack's determination remained strong. She helped him inside, ensuring he was comfortable, and then confronted the visitors herself. They introduced themselves politely, but Clara could sense the underlying greed in their words and eyes. They asked questions about the ranch, subtly probing for information about ownership and assets. Clara kept her composure, answering only what was necessary and maintaining a calm, firm tone. That evening, Jack and Clara discussed what had happened. He admitted that he had avoided these relatives for years because he knew their intentions were not genuine. Clara listened, offering support, but she also realized that protecting Jack required more than emotional care. It required vigilance, intelligence, and courage. She vowed to stand by him, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. As the days passed, Jack's health continued to fluctuate. Some mornings he seemed stronger, able to walk the fields and check on the cattle with relative ease. Other days he could barely leave his chair, coughing violently and needing Clara's full attention. She learned to anticipate his needs, preparing meals, medications, and blankets before he even asked. Her life had become a delicate balance between tending to the ranch, supporting Jack, and guarding against external threats. One particularly difficult afternoon, Jack's condition worsened suddenly. He had been walking near the fence line when he stumbled, clutching his chest in pain. Clara rushed to his side, helping him back to the house. His breathing was shallow and his face was pale. She guided him to the couch, holding him steady as he gasped for air. "Clara, he managed, his voice strained. "You can, Jack, I'm right here," she said firmly, her hands steady on his shoulders. "We'll get through this together." Hours passed as Clara cared for him, monitoring his breathing, offering sips of water and keeping him calm. She refused to leave his side, her presence a constant reassurance. Slowly, Jack's breathing stabilized and color returned to his cheeks. He looked at her with gratitude and vulnerability, a side of him he rarely showed to anyone. You saved me again," he whispered. Clara shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "No, Jack, we saved each other." That night, as the ranch lay quiet under a blanket of stars, Clara reflected on how far they had come. She had arrived as a forgotten mail-order bride, unsure of her place in a vast, lonely world. Yet in caring for Jack, she had discovered courage, strength, and a sense of belonging. She understood that their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more illness, more threats, more tests of their patience and loyalty. But she also knew that together they could face anything. In the following weeks, Clara's bond with Jack deepened. She learned to read his moods, anticipate his needs, and offer comfort without words. Jack, in turn, began to rely on her not just for care but for companionship. He shared stories of the ranch's past, the hardships he had endured, and the quiet victories he had achieved. Clara listened intently, absorbing every detail, understanding that she was becoming a part of something much larger than herself. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Jack spoke with a quiet intensity. "Clara, I don't know what I would have done without you. You've given me more than care, you've given me hope." Clara's heart swelled. She had never expected to find such purpose in her journey, but she realized that her presence had changed Jack's life as much as his presence had changed hers. She reached out, holding his hand gently. "And you've changed mine, Jack, more than you could ever know." Yet, even in this moment of connection, Clara knew that danger and uncertainty were still present. The relatives who had appeared briefly were only the beginning. Jack's wealth and the ranch he had built so carefully could attract others with less noble intentions. Clara understood that her role was not just to care for Jack's health and spirit, but also to protect everything he had worked for. As night fell, Clara stayed awake, thinking about the future. She knew that Jack's recovery would be gradual and uncertain, that threats could come from outside, and that challenges would test their loyalty and courage. But she also knew that their bond, forged through care, trust, and shared struggle, was strong enough to face whatever came next. In the quiet of the ranch, under the shimmering stars and the gentle rustle of the wind through the fields, Clara felt a sense of purpose and determination. She had come as a forgotten mail-order bride, uncertain and alone. Now she was a partner, a protector, and a steadfast presence in the life of a man who had once believed he could survive only in solitude. And somewhere deep in her heart, Clara knew that the greatest challenges and the greatest rewards were still ahead. The ranch lay quiet under the soft glow of early morning. Clara moved through the house with careful steps, checking on Jack as she did every day. His breathing was steady, but his strength was still fragile. Weeks of illness and struggle had left him weakened, yet he faced each day with quiet determination. Clara admired him more with each passing moment. She had come to understand that courage was not always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and persistent. Jack had begun to trust her completely, revealing more of his thoughts and fears than he had ever shared with anyone. He spoke of his father, of the early mornings and long days that had shaped him, and of the loneliness that had followed the passing of those he loved. Clara listened patiently, never judging, never interrupting, letting him speak at his own pace. In turn, Jack began to notice her dedication, her patience, and her strength. He realized that she had become not just his caregiver, but his anchor, his friend, and perhaps something even deeper. One afternoon, while the sun was high in the sky, Clara found Jack sitting quietly in his study. Papers and documents were spread across the desk, evidence of the vast holdings he had built over the years. Clara approached, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "Jack, you've done so much here," she said softly. "All this, it's incredible." Jack looked up at her, his eyes tired but filled with emotion. "It doesn't mean much if I have no one to share it with," he admitted. "I've spent so long alone, guarding what I built, that I forgot what it felt like to trust someone." Clara knelt beside him, her heart aching at the vulnerability in his voice. "You don't have to be alone anymore," she said. "I'm here, I'll stay." He smiled faintly, the first real, unguarded smile in weeks. "I know," he whispered, "and that means more than I can say." Over the next days, Clara continued to care for Jack, tending to his health, managing the ranch, and keeping a watchful eye on any potential threats. She had learned to read the subtle signs of his condition, when he was tired, when he needed rest, and when he was pushing himself too hard. Her presence brought him comfort, and he began to regain small pieces of strength, walking further each day and participating more actively in the ranch's daily operations. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jack called Clara to his side. "There's something I need to show you," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. He led her to a locked drawer in his study and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were documents detailing the full extent of his wealth, the properties, the investments, and the careful plans he had made to protect the ranch and its future. Clara's eyes widened as she took in the papers. She had suspected his fortune was large, but the reality was far beyond what she had imagined. Yet, even as she felt awe and surprise, she also felt a deep respect for Jack. This wealth had not come easily. It was the result of years of hard work, careful planning, and dedication, and now he was sharing it with her, trusting her completely. I never knew," Clara said softly. "I knew you had built something remarkable, but this is beyond words." Jack took her hand gently. "I trust you, Clara," he said. "Not for what you can do for me, not for this, but because you care. You stayed when most would have left, and you've become a part of my life in a way I never expected." Clara felt tears welling in her eyes. "And you've become a part of mine, Jack. I've never felt this kind of connection before. It's more than I imagined when I came here." For the first time, they allowed themselves to sit in the quiet of the moment, holding hands, sharing a bond that went beyond words. The ranch, the wealth, and the past struggles had all led to this point, a moment of trust, love, and understanding. But life was not without challenges. The distant relatives who had shown interest in the ranch had not disappeared. Clara remained vigilant, managing correspondence, handling inquiries, and ensuring that Jack was shielded from any unnecessary stress. Her role had expanded from caregiver to protector, and she embraced it with determination. One afternoon, as they walked through the fields together, Jack spoke quietly. "Clara, I've realized something. All these years, I thought I had to protect everything alone. I thought no one could understand the weight of what I carry. But you've shown me that it's okay to let someone in, that it's okay to trust, to care, and to love." Clara looked at him, her eyes filled with warmth. "And you've shown me that courage isn't just about strength, it's about patience, resilience, and hope. We've both grown because of each other." The weeks turned into months, and Jack's health improved steadily under Clara's care. He regained strength, walked longer distances, and even began to enjoy the simple pleasures of ranch life once more. Clara, too, found fulfillment in her role, discovering a sense of purpose, courage, and belonging she had never known before. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun sink behind the mountains, Jack turned to Clara with a serious expression. "There's something I need to do," he said. "I need to ensure that everything I've built is protected for the future, and that includes you." Clara tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of documents, legal papers that designated her as the primary guardian of the ranch and all its holdings in the event of anything happening to him. "I want you to have this, Clara," he said. "Not for what it is, but because you've earned my trust, my respect, and my heart. You've become my partner, my equal, and I want you to be part of the future I've worked so hard to protect." Clara felt a rush of emotion, tears streaming down her face. "Jack, I don't know what to say. It's more than I ever expected." He smiled, taking her hands in his. "You've given me more than I could ever have hoped for. You've given me life, hope, and love. I want you to be part of every day from now on." That night they sat together by the fire, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments of understanding. The weight of the past, the illness, and the challenges they had faced together now seemed lighter, softened by the bond they had built. Clara realized that love and trust had transformed the ranch, the man she had come to care for, and herself. As days passed, the ranch became a place of joy, growth, and renewal. Clara and Jack worked side by side, managing the cattle, tending the fields, and planning for the future. The distant relatives had retreated, unable to challenge the strength of their bond and the careful protections Jack had put in place. Clara's presence had not only nurtured Jack back to health, but had also safeguarded everything he had worked for. One afternoon, as they walked through the fields together, Clara paused to take in the beauty of the land. The sun glinted off the tall grasses, the cattle grazed peacefully, and the mountains stood like silent guardians in the distance. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that they had overcome so much together. Jack turned to her, his eyes filled with gratitude and love. "Clara, I used to believe that I had to face everything alone, but now I see that life is better when it's shared. You've changed everything for me, and I can't imagine a future without you." Clara smiled, her heart full. "And you've changed everything for me, Jack. I found strength, purpose, and love here, more than I could ever have imagined." As the sun set behind the mountains, they walked hand in hand across the ranch, the fields bathed in golden light. The journey had been long and difficult, filled with illness, fear, and uncertainty. But together, they had faced every challenge, discovered the power of trust and love, and built a life stronger than either could have imagined alone. Clara, once a forgotten mail-order bride, had saved a dying cowboy, only to discover that he owned everything. Yet more importantly, she had found something far greater than wealth, the trust, love, and partnership that would guide them through the rest of their lives. And as the stars began to shine overhead, Clara knew that their story was not just about survival or fortune. It was about courage, loyalty, and the quiet, powerful bond between two people who chose to face the world together. The ranch, the wealth, and the challenges they had overcome were all part of the story. But the heart of it was their connection, unbreakable and enduring, guiding them toward a future filled with hope, love, and shared dreams.